Dante's Divine Comedy, the Inferno, Cantos 15, 16, 17, and 18. Dante and Virgil are about to leave the circle of the violent, but they have to meet the last group of the violent in this circle first. Sorry, they have to meet, before they do, they encounter the violent against nature. Nature was a concept first formulated by the ancient Greek philosophers to define that force that underlies all the changes or the cycle of changes in the cosmos and the universe. The cycles of birth, growth, decline, the movement of the seasons, the planets, the constellations. But the Greek philosophers did not go beyond this definition because they were also concerned about finding something underlying nature itself, divine force, for example, demiurge, as some of them would call it. However, it was around the end of the 10th century and the beginning of the 11th century that the concept of nature underwent a revival in the city of Chartres in France, where a school of philosophy began that focused itself on the doctrines of Plato concerning the cosmos. And it was from this period onwards that the concept of nature began to be more focused on by the philosophers and men of letters of the Middle Ages. And it was also around this time that the concept of nature was expanded to include not just that force which underlies the movement in the cosmos and in the plant world and animal world, as one would call it, but also nature as the force that underlies the activities in the world of human beings as well. And here it was that the concept of the natural law began to be formulated and defined as well. And this was particularly significant that it happened around this time because, as we know from history, the 10th to 11th century were a period of rapid urbanization throughout Europe in the Middle Ages, and also commercialization as well. And it was because of this rapid urbanization and commercialization that there was a tendency also to have a very profit-based economy, even then in the Middle Ages, at all costs, to the extent sometimes of ignoring the principles of natural justice in the natural law. And one example of this was the vice of usury. Usury was the practice of lending out money at very high interest rates that were not equitable at all to the amount lent. And this was a very serious vice in the Middle Ages because it affected the livelihood of many people, especially those who were not financially well off. And these usurers are an example of sins of violence against nature, whom Dante places in this circle of violence in the Inferno. And he describes them as suffering in two ways. First of all, he tells us that they have a very scorched, burnt appearance. And this appearance of the usurers in the Inferno reflect also the reality of the effects of their usury while they were alive on earth. Because they were charging such high interest rates, non-negotiable interest rates, they were scorching, in a sense, the people, their debtors who had borrowed money from them, scorching them in the sense that they were draining away the livelihood of these people, the earnings of these people, which were not only necessary for themselves, but also for their dependents. And because they were draining away their livelihood in this manner, the debtors were eventually reduced to destitution. They were deprived even of the basic means of livelihood. And for this reason, the usurers now in the Inferno begin to experience within themselves the same effects of destitution and privation that they had inflicted on, unjustly inflicted on others while they were in this world. They are scorched in this sense. And we all know what it means to be scorched, the extreme, intense levels and degrees of heat cause the moisture to evaporate and dry up. And when such intense heat affects the human body, it's the skin as well, it begins to drain away a lot of moisture from the surface of the skin. And eventually the whole person loses a sense of vitality and energy, because his skin is being scorched. And so the usurers are being scorched in this sense. And the heat, of course, is the justice of God, who is finally addressing the injustice of these usurers themselves. Then secondly, Dante tells us that another aspect of their punishment was that they were walking in a very grotesque way, because they were walking forward, but their heads had been twisted backwards 180 degrees. And this is something very grotesque, you can imagine it. So these usurers were actually walking forward, but they were looking backward completely, directly. Their line of vision was not in front, where the feet were going. The feet were moving forward in front, but their heads had been turned 180 degrees backwards. So they were still looking back, even though they were walking ahead in front. And the significance of this punishment was forever in the Inferno, forever, they would always be looking back at the wrong that they had done. They would be always looking back, and they would be made to see not just the injustice, but also the effects of that injustice, lives that had been destroyed, lost, because they had inflicted such exorbitant interest on the loans that they had given to others, so much so that either the people who had borrowed money from them, being unable to repay them and to repay the interest as well, sometimes had to deprive themselves of their own material possessions and even the basic necessities of life to find money to pay their creditors. And of course, as we all know, this results in great suffering, in great hardship. And there were others also who would be deprived of life themselves because of the despair that they would experience in not being able to raise the sum needed to pay their creditors. And all this because of the sin or the vice of usury. And Dante says is that the punishment for these usurers in hell, in addition to suffering the same privation, the same destitution that they had inflicted on others, they also have to constantly be made to remember and to look backwards, meaning to say, look back at their lives, the lives that they had lived on this earth, in this world, a life of oppressing others, of unjustly depriving others of even the basic necessities of life. And forever they would be doing that. They may be walking, their feet are in the correct position and moving in the correct direction, but their heads are twisted backwards 180 degrees to make them look forever, to stare, to gaze, to have it in front of their face all the time, the injustice that they had done, and to be filled with a remorse, a regret that they would never be able to overcome because they would never be able to set right, correct that the harm that they had inflicted on others. And so from this point onwards, Dante and Virgil exit the circle of the violent and are about to descend into the circle of fraud, of those who have to suffer in the inferno because of their sins of fraud, the fraudulent, as they would be called. And their descent into this circle of fraud is somehow facilitated, so to speak, unlike previous transitions from one circle of the inferno to another, where they had to cautiously climb down a slope that was very slippery or dangerous. There was always a possibility of really sliding down to a point where they would be injured. But now, as they are about to descend into the circle of the fraudulent, their descent is facilitated, made easy, because they are descending into that circle on the back of an animal, a mythological animal. This is one of the reasons why one has to say that whatever is described in the Inferno must not be taken literally. And the animal has a name. His name is Geryon, but the animal is actually what one would call a griffin. A griffin in some mythologies is an animal that is made up of whose body consists of parts taken from other animals as well. And what happens is, as they reach the brim of the circle of the violent, Virgil tells Dante to remove his cincture and drop it over the abyss as a signal for this creature to rise up from the depths to the brim, to enable Dante and Virgil to get onto its back so that it could take them down to the circles of the fraudulent. Now, this somewhat casual gesture of removing the cincture and dropping it over the brim has been a subject for commentary for Dante's commentators as well. Some would say that removing the cincture signifies having to ready oneself for serious encounter of hardship, because as we all know, sometimes one has to keep one's cincture on, and to let go of the cincture was actually to let one's guard down. Sometimes we wear cinctures to keep the clothes in place so that they don't get in the way when we do our work. And then when the work is done and one wants to relax, one just removes the cincture. Removing the cincture gives one a sense of relaxation, or of the losing of tension and stress that one may have had accumulated in the process of exerting oneself in the labor that one has set oneself to. In a sense, removing the cincture would also mean, for some other commentators, it also means letting one's guard down. Removing the cincture, meaning to say, we're wanting to relax oneself, wanting to remove something that constricts one's body, indirectly also means loosening oneself in the sense of letting down one's guard. And this is also something that happens, I believe, when one is easily taken in by confidence tricksters. If we let our guard down too easily, then we allow these people who are out to deceive us. We are enabling them to have a field day. The scammers and the cheats and the confidence tricksters, con men, and so on. They will be able to achieve what they want when they see that we are no longer on guard. We have let our guard down. We are not alert. We are not vigilant. We are not switched on. So Dante's gesture of throwing his cincture over the brim signifies exposing himself, letting himself become vulnerable to being deceived, to being defrauded, so to speak. And it's interesting to consider this moment where he descends into the circle of the fraudulent. At this point, he lets his guard down. Now he is vulnerable. He has thrown away his cincture. He has thrown away a sense of caution, a sense of alertness, a sense of vigilance. And what happens? The creature ascends from the abyss and he appears. And the appearance of this creature, he has the face of a human being. And it's also a very gentle, kind, polite face, but he has the body of a serpent and he has the tail of a scorpion. And this is the most perfect, precise metaphor for a deceitful person, of a deceitful person. And I believe our experience of life will tell us that. Anyone who wants to deceive us will put on a face a mask, very open, very having some semblance of honesty, having a face that has an expression that invites trust, confidence, belief, an expression that is such that people are easily taken in. But beneath that expression, there is deceit, there is cunning, there is craftiness, there is, what's the word for it? The double entendre in whatever he says. The prevarication, the ability to mince words. And that is the deceit behind and beneath that expression. And all that is signified by the body of the serpent. The creature has the body of a serpent. And we know serpents, snakes, they move very quietly. We are not aware that they are around because they don't make any sound at all when they move, when they creep on the ground, when they wind themselves around the tree of a branch or anything, or even, they are very quiet. There's no noise, there's no sound, but they are there and they are ready to strike. And the fact that they move so quietly, so noiselessly, makes us all the more unaware. And when they finally strike, they hiss and they bite, we are not prepared. We are not prepared. And we become their victims. The same for this deceitful and fraudulent serpent. We are not aware of how deceitful he is. His deceit, his cunning, his prevarications are all, we are not aware of it. But it's there. It's all working inside his mind and his heart. It comes out through his mouth, but we don't see it, we don't hear it, we don't feel it. We are not aware because one has let one's guard down. And then the creature has the tail of a scorpion. It stings. And we all know the scorpion's sting is poisonous. And meaning to say that when finally he has caught us in his trap, and when finally one has fallen for what he says, one has been deceived, one has been completely taken in, one has been bought, one falls into the trap. And immediately one realizes that it has been all a scam. But it's too late. He has given a vast sum of money, or he has given some object, he has sold something, and he has sold himself cheap for nothing. And it's too late. It's too late. The deceitful person, the fraudulent person, the scammer, has gone. He has disappeared. And there's no way to recover what has been handed over. And one begins to feel the sting of remorse, of regret, of emptiness, of deprivation, the pain. And it's irremediable. It cannot be remedied. My English is not at its best this morning. Irremediable, so I'm trying to say. And so this is the image of fraud. This is the whole dynamic of fraud that Dante is describing for us in this simple, at this stage of his descent from the circle of the violent to the circle of the fraudulent. He throws his belt over the abyss. He lets his guard down. He's no longer switched on. He is not aware. He is easily taken in by the face of Geryon, a human face. He climbs onto the back together with Virgil. He climbs onto the back of a serpent. he does not realize that it is a serpent. The serpent moves noiselessly. So he's taken in. And Virgil sits behind him to prevent the sting of the scorpion to touch Dante. And so it is that the creature with Dante and Virgil on its back begin its descent to the circle of the proton. And Dante describes it. He says it's almost unimpeded. He doesn't have to, there are no wings. The creature just goes down smoothly but swiftly. Yeah. And this is how one falls into the trap of being deceived. You are not aware of it, but it just, the deceitful person is smooth talker. You are taken in, and very quickly you fall, and that's it. So this is the beginning of Dante's journey among the circles of the fraudulent. Thank you.